first of all, by way of introduction, my name is John T. Aitken. I'm one of the directors of HR Talk, and one of my portfolios is business development. And what we mean by that is I look at, together with my team, all of the new tech coming out, particularly in South Africa, around payroll systems, HR systems, new technology like AI, and the impact on HR, how it's changing everything that we do on a daily basis, and we look at how they can solve particular problems for clients. So it's quite a broad spectrum of things, and obviously in the last 7 months, everything has just got so interesting, but everything is moving very, very quickly. So just to say, 20 minutes to half an hour is way too short to deal with this type of topic. So if there is interest to talk about how AI and automation can help your business, please do feel free to reach out to us afterwards. Now you'll notice we talk about AI and automation. Automation has actually been around for quite a while, but it's this combination of using AI and large language models and automation, which have really changed the way that a lot of businesses are operating in this space. Now, I think it's quite ironic just to take a step back for the moment and think about HR conceptually. So when we look at a lot of our HR clients, it's interesting that people have moved into the HR space mainly because they wanted to deal with people. And their biggest frustration has been that they spend less time dealing with people issues because they get caught up in the admin, because there's so much admin involved these days in HR. So it's the statutory reporting side of things, it's your standard HR life cycle, where we're just doing a whole lot of admin. And so our HR practitioners feel very frustrated that they don't get back into HR. And the big advantage of where AI and automation is bringing us is actually a situation where we can streamline and automate all of those admin processes so that HR can get back to dealing with the people side of things. And most importantly, even if you do have the AI and automation, that HR, that human element, is absolutely critical. Okay, we can't automate everything without keeping our human touch. So we'll deal with that in a little bit of as we go through with things. So what I'm going to talk about today, so I'm going to go into, okay, so AI and automation, why should we care in our businesses? Why is it potentially important? We're going to look at some of the key themes that we need to think about if we are going to implement these things. I'm then going to talk about some ideas in the market. So what are we seeing in the US in particular, but around the world in terms of where AI is being brought into the HR space. If we've got time, I'll then go through a case study. Now, just one thing to bear in mind here. So why are we not a bad company to be talking to you about this sort of thing? Do I know where AI is going to go to in the future? No, I've got no idea. Okay, but we are on a daily basis dealing with clients where we are implementing a number of these AI and automation solutions. We've built chatbots, we've built agents, we've done automation. So we've got quite a lot of experience in that space. And fundamentally, HR Talk is all about solving particular problems for clients. Okay, and so that's why I think when I start to talk to you about some of these ideas, I'll also raise where we think that you need to be quite careful when you look at particular things, what the pushback might be from employees, some of the other things that we might see as challenges when you do so. Okay, so let's get going. Okay, I would, but my screen is not moving. Hold on a second. Oh, too far. Okay, so I think fundamentally when we talk about any new tool for a business, okay, there needs to be a commercial rationale for why we do things. And in many cases in HR, it's a case of looking at the business and going, we don't want the big tamale. We don't need everything. What is it that will actually make a difference to our business? Where are we going to save costs? Okay, how are we going to reduce risk? How are we going to increase efficiency? Because ultimately that improves our bottom line. Okay, and as part of that, how do we improve communication so that we have a better interaction with our workforce? So we need to be very clear, why are we looking at AI and automation? Okay, what is our particular goal we're trying to achieve? And then how do we measure if it's been successful? The second critical element is this concept of human intervention. It's called human touch in the loop. Lots of acronyms in AI. So we can automate a lot of these things, but at what point do we want a human to apply their mind and say, go, no go, yes, I'm happy with this or not? Okay, and there are lots of examples that we can give in this space as we go through what's happening in the market. Okay, but it could be to do with key decisions, could be to do with providing sensitive feedback. It could be a situation where if we're giving over the authority to a system to make decisions, and it could have quite a big financial impact, okay, actually we need some sort of stage gate to say, yes, that's a good idea or not a good idea. Otherwise, we're giving away our authority. We need to think about, as we design these things, what can go wrong? Okay, is there inherent bias? Because all AI is a probability engine. It looks at, the data points that you give it, and it says, what is the most likely answer here? And yes, it can be very good, and we can train it, okay, but we're training it on specific historic information, so that can potentially lead to bias. Are we comfortable giving information on individual employees in our business into the AI? How do we manage that? Okay. Are we at risk of losing the personal touch with employees or with candidates? So we need to think through that. And then how do we maintain and monitor it? We don't want a situation where we have AI and automation, but nobody remembers why we did it in the first place. And so they don't actually know what it's supposed to be doing. And as we then progress and change our business, it doesn't keep up and we don't know to change it. So we need to understand what it's doing. Okay. We need to have a way of tracking what it's doing and making sure it's still doing what it's supposed to do. Because there's this fundamental thing. It's there to serve our people strategy, not to completely replace it and do something completely different. Okay. And if the AI does it, it doesn't protect us from a POPIA breach or GDPR in Europe. We need to make sure that we've built in place the controls that make it something that our business can live with. Okay. And it doesn't create too much risk for us. That's not the intent. Okay, so if I talk a couple of examples, so there are lots of different things. Okay, there are lots of different things happening. Some of the things that we see a lot of is particularly around onboarding and recruitment. Okay, so on the recruitment side of things, we've got AI that's sifting, it can create the job description, it can send it out onto the job boards, it can receive the CVs, it filters the CVs based on what you've told it to look at for the key things and says, yeah, this person's a fit. And it can actually automatically say to the other people, sorry, you don't meet the criteria, we're not going to progress your application. Okay, it can set up meetings. Okay, we can have a chatbot that deals with people approaching us for particular roles. Okay, and schedules the interviews and manages pre-screening. Okay, the key thing here is you're building a tool, but there's already been a lot of pushback in social media around some of these things where candidates feel like all they're doing is speaking to a bot. They never speak to an individual. And that's actually tarnished some of the organizations' reputations because candidates feel that they don't care. Okay, so it's quite important to match expectations. Obviously, massively important when you do this to make sure that when you set up the job description, you've done it accurately. Otherwise, it's going to be filtering and rejecting people because the information you've put in there is incorrect to start with. Okay, so somebody needs to apply their mind at a point to say, yes, this is the particular role. Yeah or no, we haven't made a mistake, and manage it on that basis. When I talk to the case study later around automation and onboarding, actually, this is a place where historically, a lot of our clients, we find that whenever we have a grievance, our ability to fight a grievance from an employee is often driven by how well the onboarding process worked. Did they have a signed employment contract? Do we have proper policies and procedures? Did the employee read the policies and procedures and show that they did? And was it available to them? Okay, was their job description clear? And if we've got that in place, okay, and then we've run a proper disciplinary process and we follow a proper process, then actually we're unlikely to ever have any major challenges going through a CCMA or an arbitration route, okay, because we've done the basics well. Where we struggle with clients is where they haven't done this properly to start with, and they're gaps. Okay, now if you automate a lot of this, then it means your risk is managed much more clearly at this stage. But I'll talk to that a little bit later. Training and development is another area where has been massive improvement, because now our ability to create training paths or training for specific individuals is made far easier. So I'll give you an example. We, at the moment, it could be for a recruitment situation, or it could be for somebody who's moving from a junior management position to a senior management position. We can do a psychometric requirement. It can be virtual reality or simulation type work. And a lot of that stuff can be created very quickly and quite cost effectively. Okay, so it's no longer a case of saying, I need to send somebody on an Excel course and you go to a service provider and they do a very, very general training. It could be for this specific individual, they need to be able to handle difficult conversations, and I want some practical simulations that they need to work through. Okay, they need to work on their soft skills. They need to work on their negotiation skills. We can create a package for them, assign it to them, they go through it. So it's all designed very much around the individual as opposed to a generic type of arrangement. So I think a lot of happening in training and development, which is, very interesting. Employee management is an area which is getting a lot of debate. Okay, so I think there's some easy ones. So employee experience and engagement, where we, for example, we can quite easily set up an agent that responds to employees' queries about the company's policies and procedures, maybe around the disciplinary process. So all of the things which are covered in your company's policies and procedures, because that's very easy to set up. Okay. Now, what we find with those things, they're all very well, but people also want to chat to an HR person. They want that human touch. But those are relatively simple to put out, to set up, and to help the workload for HR. I think the ones that are a little bit more sensitive in the organizations are these ones around performance and feedback and around predictive analytics. And what we're talking about here is a situation where some companies are using AI to track what employees do, to track the words that they use in their emails, and then provide feedback, either for performance or alternatively as an assessment to say, we think that this employee is potentially at risk of leaving because they seem disengaged, or that just the wording that they use show that they're in not a great space. Okay, now obviously the challenge there is around employees now feeling like they're being watched the whole time. Okay, and recognizing that we are humans, we do have bad days. Okay, so I think there's quite a lot of thought that needs to go into implementing these sort of predictive analytics and performance and feedback, but the employee experience and engagement in terms of a combination of the chatbots plus the HR resources availability, these things can work quite well. To talk to you then an example of a combination of an automation and AI flow, let's use an onboarding example. So we had a conversation with the clients a little while back, and then suddenly this has become quite a hot topic. So we're seeing quite a lot of this happening. And it uses a combination of AI and automation to take out a lot of the admin involved in taking on board an employee. Okay, so the initial human input is for an HR administrator enters their preferred candidate details into basic form. So this is post-recruitment, we've identified the preferred candidate. Okay, remember this is just a case study. So as soon as they then submit that particular form, the combination of the AI and the automation then goes and creates an employment contract and an offer letter. Okay, that comes back to the HR administrator just to see that everything's okay. They say, yes, I'm happy. It's then sent for approval up through the organization. Doesn't matter how many people you want to have in that loop. And then once it's then approved, it's sent for signature to the manager in the organization and then the candidate, and it allows the candidate to then automatically upload and forces them to upload their ID, their contact, their proof of physical address, all of the information that HR needs. Okay, and it then saves that in a folder so that you've got everything there, and it sends reminders if it's not there, and it's quite easy for the administrator just to see where that thing is in the process. Now, as part of that, you could also, for example, go, let's add in a job description. So we don't have a job description. Okay, so AI, please create a job description for this particular candidate, for this particular role in this location, reporting to this manager. And it creates that so that can also be then sent with that employment contract. Okay. Once it's received, we can also then make sure that automated, it sends it through for a pre-employment check. Okay, so that whole process then can literally be started through a basic input from the HR administrator with a couple of stage gates where the administrator says, yes, I did put the right thing in, so the contract that's come back is a fixed term contract or a permanent contract or whatever else it might be. Okay, if you've got a couple of differences. Once the employee is then signed and said, yes, I'm happy to come work for you, it can then trigger an induction process. So it sends IT information to say, please set up the email, order the laptop and all the rest for that particular employee. You can set up a calendar entry for the day of the induction meeting. It can send through information to payroll saying, well, we've got this employee starting, here's their contract, here's the form that they've started. You could also add in things there that the employee automatically completes their post-retirement benefit, their medical aid, all of the forms that they need to fill in. So it's not a case of on day one going through that process. It can all be done automatically. And at the same time, once you've got that email from IT, you can assign day one training. So I talked about, we can create training for your particular policies and procedures. Okay, create the forms that are for employee benefits that I've talked about. But the same day time for day one training, it could be, so here's our policies and procedures and do an assessment. Here's our health and safety requirements. Here's our data security requirements. Here's an overview of our company. Those can all be assigned so that literally you have a seamless onboarding process for that employee. And when you create the calendar entries for that employee, it could be, here's the meeting with your line manager, here's the meeting with HR, here's the meeting with whoever else you might want for them to meet in the organization. So it's already set in place. It's not reliant on an HR administrator to do all these things for you. But once again, just remembering at each of these points, okay, where do we want to have the human touch? Okay, approve the contract. We don't want to send out a contract that we're not happy with. Okay, when we get the information back from the employee, we need somebody to check, or we need AI to check, and then if it sees that maybe they haven't put their ID properly, or something looks, we could do also some of our anti-money laundering checks of doing a facial recognition and all the rest. Those are the things we can build in. But then there should be something where the HR administrator says, yes, no, those have been done properly, I'm happy. Okay. Training assignment. Yes, we might need these basics, but maybe we also want somebody to assign additional training. Okay. And then tracking to make sure that all these things are happening. Okay. So we still need to make sure that there is a human involved through that process. So I talked at a very high level about how HR Talk can help. So our specialty is about designing solutions for clients. So we're quite happy to come and chat to you about where you think AI might work in your business, what your budget looks like, because obviously, we're all different sizes. And the key thing here is where's it actually going to make a difference? Okay, because if it's not going to make a huge difference, what's the point? Okay, and then it's how do we talk through that design, the human elements, making sure that we don't lose track of what's important for the business. Okay. And obviously, we will share this slide show later for interested parties. Just to say from an HR Talk perspective, please do have a look at our training modules. Okay, so we're doing a lot of training in different areas. We have a training shop where you can go and get very cheap training, sometimes free training for your employees. But more importantly, what we're looking at from a training perspective as well is how do we design the training for your specific organization based on what I've talked about earlier. So how do we design it for specific individuals for your organization in particular? okay, as opposed to this more generic training. So that's quite a nice new area of ours. And then obviously anything to do with AI and automation, please do reach out.